friends, how are you doing today? My name is Mary and this is Happily Ever Esch, and I need to share with you guys all the books I have read recently. So this is, I think it's all of March and then a few books from April. So let's just jump on into it. We have a guest. He just thinks he needs to be a part of every video, don't you? So the first book that I finished since last chatting with you guys is my favorite nonfiction that I've read so far in 2018, and that is American Wolf, a true story of survival and obsession in the West, and this is by Nate Blakeslee. I cannot put into words how much I adored this book. There is definitely a lot going on in this. So the main storyline, we're following the reintroduction of wolves into Yellowstone National Park, but also into some national parks and areas surrounding Yellowstone. So it's not just specifically in Yellowstone, but that's predominantly the wolves that we're looking at in this story. And it just kind of is the saga of reintroducing wolves back into the American landscape. And this book is riveting, you guys. There is a lot of talk about conservationism. We learn how politics really affect the way our public lands are managed and our wildlife are managed, which was at times quite infuriating for someone who really values conservationism. Of course, politics does affect every part of life. That's just part of politics, but the way laws and these wolves are dealt with at times is just very manipulative. There's a lot of times that decisions are made for national parks, and in this case directly for wolves, that isn't for the best interest of them, but is used as a political gain for different politicians. I really enjoyed that Blakeslee doesn't just approach this from a pro-wolf or pro-conservation standpoint. He also really delves into interviewing and seeking out people who were anti-wolf, and there were a lot of people who were anti-wolf. Wolf are natural predators, and so obviously they're going to eat a lot of animals that people hunt, and so it was interesting to hear from their perspective. The best part of this book and the most riveting part of this book is following the lives of these wolves. There are a couple people who really spent their lives documenting these wolves, watching them every day, observing them, learning how they block off territory and how they interact with one another. You really get to know some wolves and like their personalities and their hearts, and I absolutely loved it. There are a couple wolves in particular that you know every part of their story, or it feels like every part of their story in such intimate detail, and it just had me on the edge of my seat, and I cried at this book. I am totally a wolf fanatic. I want to go to Yellowstone and watch the wolves. This book was beautiful. So if you're into conservationism, if you like national parks, if you like wildlife, this is a book for you. I also think if you're interested in how politics shape a lot of different parts of our lives, I think this would be an interesting book for you. And if you just want to like follow the saga of some wolves, like, this is the book. It was phenomenal. Absolutely expertly written. The audiobook is fantastic. It's the same narrator who narrates The Stranger in the Woods, the story of the last true hermit, and I would listen to anything that he narrates because he is phenomenal. But I don't have the words to express to you how good I think this book is and how much I think you should pick it up. So if you've read it, chat with me down in the comments below, because this book just ripped my heart out, but it also informed me in a lot of ways, and I grew, and I think good nonfiction does that. It can do both. Good story, expanding your mind, all the things you want. That book. Okay, enough gushing. The next book that I finished was one of the best contemporary YAs that I've read in a very, very long time, probably since I was a teenager. It's a very unique piece of YA fiction, and one that I would highly suggest. I don't think it's getting the praise that it deserves, and that is Piecing Me Together by Renee Watson. I adored this book. We follow Jade, who is living in Portland, Oregon, and she is accepted into I don't know if it's a private school, but a wealthy school called St. Francis. And she has to commute there every day. And it's her story trying to navigate being in a predominantly white school, being very different from her peers, not only her race, but also economically very different from her peers. It's her trying to, or feeling like she's living two lives really. This life where she goes to the school, and then her life at home with her friends and her family, that she has very deep connections to, and it's her trying to navigate that. This also deals with really important topics like police brutality. So one of my favorite parts of this book is Jade meets another student who is commuting and kind of on scholarship to St. Francis. But this friend is white, and so Jade is trying to talk to her friend about the struggles she faces for being a black woman or a black young woman in America, and her friend just kind of completely writes her off and is like, no, like, it's all about money, it's about wealth. And so Renee Watson really does show you that the wealth disparities in our country do very much affect people's experiences. So there's similarities in their friendship in that way, but then also Jade has to kind of defend herself and explain herself about trying to get her friend to understand how race affects her daily. Another favorite part of this book is just the grace that's in it. There are conversations in this book that are hard, and there are conversations in this book that make the characters really uncomfortable, and there's not always seeing eye to eye or not always coming from the same perspective, but there is grace, and there's forgiveness, and there is the ability to maybe disagree, but also to come together and have some understanding on where the other person is coming from. And I really, really appreciated the look into that. There are so many layers and things going on in this book. It's written in very short, almost vignette-like chapters. It reminded me a lot of The House on Mango Street in that way, and it really compels you to keep reading. This novel is definitely more linear, I would say, than The House on Mango Street, but definitely one that's worthwhile. Even if you don't read a lot of YA, I would still highly suggest this one. It's very timely, and like I said, I cannot believe I haven't heard more people talking about this book. It's beautiful. Great read, great YA, and just, I would give it to all the teenagers and all the people. Okay, next I finished Maisie Dobbs by Jacqueline Winspear. This is the start of a historical fiction mystery series, and I also really loved this book. I'm on a roll. I'm like looking at the stack of books that I have, and they all were really good or really influenced the way I thought in a lot of ways, so I think I lucked out a lot. But anywho, I really adored this book. This book is very light on the mystery and very much more into getting Maisie's backstory, kind of figuring out who she is, why she is the way she is, where she came from, and I really love that because it really compelled me to care for Maisie. She's a very intelligent woman. She's got that very old school sleuth feeling, which I absolutely adore, and I really enjoyed the way the story was told. We're introduced to Maisie and the mystery that she's trying to solve, and then we flash back and learn about Maisie's life and then come back and solve the mystery. I thought that storyline was just really interesting and really compelling to get a taste of Maisie and then kind of figure out who she is and then go back and end up kind of solving the mystery. It was really satisfying. I didn't speed through this. I kind of really savored it, but I loved every second that I was spending with Maisie and her family. It is, I don't know if I said, the main mystery is set after World War I, and Maisie has been really influenced by the war, and we kind of see how the war has shaped her, and I thought that was also really interesting. It's a great series. Lots of people say they love it, and I understand why. It's just well written, it's a lot of fun, and I can tell that Maisie is going to burrow a deep hole into my heart, and I'm here for it. So I'm excited to pick up the second novel in this series. I think I might check it out on audiobook because I listened to a couple chapters of this on audio and I liked the narrator. So if it's the same one, might check that out. Next, I finished another start to a thriller mystery series, and that is The Dry by Jane Harper. I'm sure you've heard a lot of really good things about this. It was a pretty buzzy mystery thriller in the past year or so. This story follows Aaron Falk, who is going back to the town that he was raised in for the funeral of a very close friend. He drifted apart, but they were very close when he was living in this small town. I'm really excited to get to know Falk more. There's a lot of kind of hints to his past thrown out through all the novel that I really think is going to make him continue to be a compelling character in the novels to come. I really loved how atmospheric this story is. It's set in a drought in the middle of Australia, and it's so dry, and the people are very almost like driven mad by the heat and kind of a little small town crazy, if you will. They're just very insular and very, wary of outsiders, and they just kind of have this very small town feel, and they're like I said, almost like driven to the brink of madness by this total dry heat. And so you get this in the characters and in the setting. Another really cool part about this story is that we're having this dual timeline, and the author is telling the story in the future. We're trying to solve this mystery surrounding Aaron's friend. We kind of flash back to the high school years and this other mystery that's going on. And the way that she weaves these two stories together is super interesting. I really enjoyed the way that this story was told. It was super, super compelling. It's kind of a slow burn throughout most of the novel, and then all of a sudden there's like this dump at the end and you figure everything out. And I definitely think it lost some of that atmospheric feeling towards the end because, like I said, it was just kind of a dump of information, but I was totally sucked in, wanted to know. I was along for the ride. So if you like mysteries with a little bit of a thriller aspect to them, you like really atmospheric stories, and you want to follow a pretty interesting and, I would say, a little bit of a morally gray main character, I would definitely suggest picking up this series. I'm really, really excited to pick up the second novel. I think it just came out. I don't know what it's called, but I've heard good things about it too. Another nonfiction that I finished on audiobook and also really, really enjoyed is I Am 17 Brushes with Death by Maggie O'Farrell. And isn't this cover just absolutely gorgeous? I love it. The premise of this memoir is just all the things. I love this concept of the 17 brushes with death. So Maggie O'Farrell is telling 17 stories in her life where she has come close to death. She's felt close to death. She's felt close to the other side of fate, I guess, if you will, what could have happened. And so she's really reflecting on her life. And Maggie loves life. She really is someone who just lives life to the fullest and almost a little bit of a risk taker. I wouldn't say all of her brushes of death are because she's a risk taker, but she kind of like, really enjoys and seizes the day. Like, she's just that kind of person. And I just really loved how her thoughts on death and her thoughts on what could have happened in her life, and just being so grateful for the moments that she's had. I thought that was really beautiful. But I'm also just really interested at this idea of death and being aware of our mortality and coming up and rubbing kind of elbows with that idea and thinking about it, because I do think it changes our perspective. It changes how we embrace life, how we live life. And Maggie really kind of delves into that idea in all these different stories. I adored the first story. It was so good, so compelling. It took my breath away and definitely was a great setup for the rest of the novel. Some of the stories in the middle kind of get a little muddled, but the ending couple stories are also really, really good. Maggie had a pretty life-threatening illness when she was young, and obviously that really shaped her life. But then we also look at some of her experiences with her children and just that perspective, and not only kind of being responsible for your life, but also the lives of your children. And yeah, and not to mention, Maggie O'Farrell is a beautiful writer. She writes it's very visceral and real, and almost like you can kind of feel her writing. I don't know if that's a good way to explain it, but it's just very, very real feeling and heavy. I I really loved this book too, guys. So many good books. That's a happy thing. But yeah, I'm really interested in picking up more Maggie O'Farrell. I know her most recent novel that she published, I think, is called This Must Be the Place, and I'm really interested in picking that one up. So this, if the premise sounds interesting to you or you like Maggie O'Farrell's writing, I'd say go ahead and pick it up. And the audiobook was really, really good too. So I finally finished Wives and Daughters by Elizabeth Gaskell. I'm not going to gush too much about this here because I am planning on doing a full review of this beast of a book, but what can I say? I love Elizabeth Gaskell. The characters that she crafts in this novel are just crazy good. She captures humanity and understands people in such a real way. She really does. All of her characters have good and bad. They all have a lot of different motives, and they're all influenced by the lives that they've led. And she just makes the most believable and interesting characters. This novel follows Molly Gibson. She's definitely the main character, although we don't always hear from her, or we're not always hearing about her in the novel because there's a full cast of characters in this book, but she's definitely our heroine. And Molly lives with her widowed father, and they're enjoying life together until her father decides to get remarried, and she is thrown into life with a stepmother and a stepsister, and it follows just kind of their life from here. Honestly, there's not a ton of plot in this book. It's really a character study of this town and of the people living in it, and I loved it. I will say, be warned, that it's not completely finished. Unfortunately, Elizabeth Gaskell died before she could write the last chapter. You definitely know what's going to happen. She's almost wrapped the story up, but you don't kind of get that satisfying bow at the end of this beautiful package that is this book. But you know what's going to happen. I would say if you're interested, don't let that deter you, because it's still a wonderful story and the characters are just absolutely interesting. So another one that I loved. I'm a lucky girl. Next, I finally listened to a very popular YA series, and I see what all the fuss is about, and that is The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater. I really loved this book, and I think I really loved the audiobook. Whoever narrates this, I need to look it up, and maybe I'll put who narrates it down in the description box below, but did a wonderful job. This book is atmospheric and whimsical, and it has this almost southern charm with a little bit of gothic feel to it. This book made me feel like Because of Winn-Dixie, which I don't know if you've read that book, but is one of my absolute favorite childhood books, and it just has that magical, whimsical, just southern cozy feel to it. I wish I could explain to you how this book made me feel, because it was awesome. We're following Blue, and she was raised by a family of psychics in this kind of magical place in the United States called Henrietta. We're learning about ley lines and just kind of the magic of this place. And we're also following a group of kind of ragtag boys that go to a private school in Henrietta. I love the characters in this novel. They are so well crafted, and they're very real. They're very real feeling, because they all have problems, they all have issues, but they have good parts to them too. I enjoyed that all of these characters are equally complex and flawed in some way, and again are really just affected by their lives, and which is just how people are. We're affected by our lives and our circumstances, and her characters just have such interesting backstories, and I can't wait to continue with these characters, because I know that they're going to continue to grow and change, and we're going to learn more about them, and it's just I'm ready for it. I must say, a lot of this novel is kind of a slow burn. We're really kind of learning about the ley lines, and we're learning about these different characters, and at the end there is just kind of this big info dumping, and all the action is like just like given to you, and I did think that ruined some of the magic that was brewing in this book for me. It definitely didn't ruin my entire reading experience, but I was like, 10 out of 10, would recommend this book. And then kind of the ending, it let me down a little bit. I must say it let me down a little bit, but I'm still on board. I'm still so looking forward to continuing this series. Already have checked the next audiobook out on Overdrive, and it will be my next. So I think if any of that sounds good to you, and if you haven't already been convinced by the hundreds of people who have talked about this book on BookTube, hopefully I have convinced you now. And then last but certainly not least, I finished my first Toni Morrison, which is Sula. I talk a lot about this in my weekend vlog, so if you haven't seen that, I'll put it up here. I kind of give you my real-time thoughts when I'm finishing this book, but I think that Toni Morrison is an excellent writer, and I know I'm not the only one who thinks that. She gets a lot of praise, and I believe it is well deserved. She writes pure poetry. I could flip to any page pretty much and read to you an underlined line that I really thought was beautiful or powerful, because Toni Morrison packs a punch in her writing. She really just lays it out there. She just drops some truth bombs on you that makes you, I don't know, just kind of go, whoa, like, whoa. And so like I said, I took a lot out of individual parts and pieces, but as a novel, as a whole, and as a plot, I think there's a lot that I didn't get and a lot that I didn't connect with. We're following Sula and also Nell and their friendship, but we also get a ton of other perspectives, or maybe not perspectives, we get a ton of other characters in this book. I think this book really focuses on themes of community, in particular Black community. In this book, it looks a lot at motherhood, the effects of World War I think it's World War I and possibly World War II, but just the effects of war on this community, obviously the effects of racism and slavery on this community, just a lot of things in this tiny little book. But after I finished this book, I felt very unsettled. I kept thinking about it and trying to kind of figure out all the things that Toni Morrison was doing, and it definitely left me with a book hangover. I want to sit down and like listen to someone talk about Toni Morrison who has studied her and understands her themes and motifs and really can just school me on all the things that I think I'm missing out on just trying to read this book for an enjoyment purpose. But yeah, so much good, cool things that I felt like I gleaned from this book, but also a lot of confusion. And so yeah, I'm definitely going to try more Toni Morrison. I have a ton of books on her shelves. I'd love to know suggestions for where you think I should go next. And I don't know, maybe I will seek out some more resources and try to learn more about Toni Morrison before I try to read more of her novels. We'll see, but I wanna try the flip to a page and see what I can find. Oh, okay. 4 white boys in their early teens, sons of some newly arrived Irish people, occasionally entertained themselves in the afternoon by harassing Black school children. With shoes that pinched and woolen knickers that made red rings on their calves, they had come to this valley with their parents, believing as they did that it was a promised land, green and shimmering with welcome. What they found was a strange accent, a pervasive fear of their religion, and firm resistance of their attempts to find work. With one exception, the older residents of Medallion scorned them. The one exception was the Black community. Although some of the Negroes had been in Medallion before the Civil War, the town didn't even have a name then. If they had any hatred for these newcomers, it didn't matter because it didn't show. As a matter of fact, baiting them was the one activity that the white Protestant residents concurred in. In part, their place in this world was secured only when they echoed the old residents' attitude towards the Blacks. So just a major, all the things that she puts in that is just so, you know, you could just pick that apart and just learn from what she has to say in that passage. It's just, she writes so powerfully and beautifully. Here's another one I really liked. And they saw the lamb's eye and the truly innocent victim, themselves. They acknowledged the innocent child hiding in the corner of their hearts, holding a sugar and butter sandwich. That one. The one who lodged deep in their fat, thin, old, young skin and was the one the world had hurt. Or they thought of their son newly killed and remembered his legs and short pants and wondered where the bullet went in. Or they remembered how dirty the room looked when their father left home and wondered if that is the way the slim young Jew felt. He who for them was both son and lover, and in those downy faces they could see the sugar and butter sandwiches and feel the oldest and most devastating pain there is. Not the pain of childhood, but the remembrance of it. She's too good. So, like I said, I have a lot to learn, but I'm really glad that I read this book, and I will be for sure seeking more Toni Morrison out in one form or another. So those are all the books, guys. I'm sorry if this video is 1.5 million years long, but I just had to share all of the things that I've been reading with you guys. Please chat with me if you have anything to say about any of these books, or if you want to tell me what you've been reading. I'd love to chat with you down in the comments. Definitely suggest more Toni Morrison, or where I should go next with her, or any resources that you think might help me better understand Toni Morrison's writings and themes and that kind of stuff. I would love to know that as well. So I hope that you guys are having a great April, and I will talk to y'all very soon. Bye.